EdTech Mondays Uganda is supported by the Mastercard Foundation Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning and the Innovation Village. Welcome. Now, Africa might be the continent with the biggest desire for EdTech growth. However, significant barriers still hold back the continent. A Ibrahim Report of 2021 notes that 89% of learners in sub-Saharan Africa lack access to household computers, and another 82% lack access to the internet. Without these two core infrastructure, sub-Saharan Africa's ability to take charge of and use EdTech in skilling its youth, demography remains a far cry. On this edition of EdTech Monday, we ask experts how this problem can be overcome. Thank you so much and welcome to EdTech Monday. Thank you guys for making it for this season's EdTech Monday. I'd like to start with you, maybe introducing yourselves and what you do.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Raymond. My name is Robert Bob Okello. I'm the founder and CEO of Marifa Sasa Limited, where we are digitally upskilling, reskilling, and creating digital employment opportunities for Africa's youth. Very happy to join the conversations today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Raymond. My name is Norman Angel. I work with Digital Literacy Initiative, a non-profit organization that works to ensure safe digital spaces for minorities and also ICT awareness. My background is in information technology, and I'm also a data analyst. Very pleased to be here.
All right.
Thank you very much, Raymond. My name is Anthony Tugineo. I'm an assistant lecturer at Makerere University under the Department of Environmental Management, under the the College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences. I also serve as a program administrator under the e-learning initiative at Makerere University that is doing its best to make sure that all the courses and the programs get online. Thank you very much.
All right. Rob, I want to start with you maybe. Digital literacy is so important in EdTech. It's like the language within which you can understand EdTech. And yet it still remains a far cry for many young learners across Africa. Why is this so? Why is there a divide between digital literacy and EdTech in Africa?
Absolutely. I think that's a very key question. When it comes to issues of data literacy, I think for a very long time, we focus on the different types of literacies, numeracy and all this. And we, for a very large part of it, ignore data literacy. And so today we're in a situation where we find a lot of learners who can read and write for the most of it, but a lot of them, when it comes to using some of these ICTs, information and communication technologies, they completely lag behind. So I think that one of the biggest reasons for this divide is, one, the point at which we introduce our learners to the digital literacy. When we begin to teach them is a big one. Another aspect is when you look across Africa, and here in Uganda, we still have policies that I think are quite prohibitive when it comes to introducing digital literacy. A case in point, in most of our schools in Uganda, especially the national schools, let alone the international schools, it's still unacceptable for students to go with electronic devices to schools, for example, right? Now, if you look at other parts of the world and the sort of places we are competing with, because today, again, because of these digital literacy things we're talking about, the world has become so connected. Our counterparts elsewhere are introducing the young people to these tools at a very early age. And yet here, our learners are lagging behind because they can't use these sort of things. And so I think beginning to address these issues of policy as well could also help us to bridge that gap as well.
Norman, the question that I want to ask is really, he talks about introducing digital literacy to learners at a young age, but the numbers are clear. 89% don't have computers, 82% have no access to the basic internet. You can't speak a language which you don't have infrastructure for. Is this a question of first availing infrastructure and then people will learn, or learning as we wait for the infrastructure to come?
Thank you very much, Raymond. Absolutely. One of our major programs is actually digital literacy, where we are doing an integrated approach to skilling and developing young children. But I think the major problem we faced is that in a country like Uganda or sub-Saharan Africa is actually access. As the statistics says, it's very true, and that's a big challenge. I think the major thing is actually providing infrastructure, because one of the major problems is actually digital divide, where there is lack of access to internet and devices for people who live in rural areas compared to those who live in urban areas. The other thing is also, as I mentioned, policy. I think governments within sub-Saharan Africa have to incorporate policies like the national ICT that incorporate digital literacy in curriculum. So infrastructure is a very big need for countries where people are living in areas where they don't have electricity. So introducing equipments like low-end equipments that can be able to avail content to areas which don't have access. And also the other thing is being able to use mobile technology, because the problem is infrastructure. Then you want to reach people who live in rural areas because the rate of mobile device penetration is high. So this can enable countries like Uganda or in sub-Saharan Africa to provide digital literacy content even in areas which have limited access to internet. So you're very correct. Infrastructure is actually is what we should go first forward, then be able to bring people on board to learn.
Yeah, Anthony, if I could also ask you this question.
Sure.
The issue around infrastructure, I see places like Kampala where infrastructure is already existent. You have the internet, you have devices, but you still look at the gap between, for example, the rich and the poor. In slum areas, you find access to devices still low, or you find digital literacy on the low end. How do you solve it in urban areas? Because a lot of Africa is quickly urbanizing. What
we need to appreciate is digital literacy as it is. It's just like when you're learning a language. I mean, you need to be intentional on it. Just like when your kid is growing, if a kid gets to an age of 5 and he can't speak or she can't speak, you get worried. So it's the same way we as people in education systems, or we the parents, need to worry about digital literacy when we're dealing with our kids. Because you'll see a parent restricting a kid from accessing a device, or clicking a phone or clicking a laptop's keyboard. That is very restricting. Just like a language is, if you're restricted on saying some words, then you cannot learn the language. So I think for us, we need to be intentional when it comes to digital literacy, even at home. You should worry if your kid is 10 and cannot make a phone call or cannot type his name on a keyboard over a computer. So I think it's about us being intentional, knowing that this is something that will change this kid's life in future, or even as he grows, even as he goes to school, he'll need the literacy. So it's being intentional and worrying that your kid doesn't know something to do with that computer.
Rob, there's also a cultural aspect that's attached to this. He says, you should be worried if at 10 years your child can't make a phone call. But I know so many parents who say, my child will not touch a mobile phone because the mobile phone will send them in all these ways. They might start betting on games, they might start doing other things on the internet. What is it about digital literacy that we can tell parents so that they understand that it's safe for children to use, or what infrastructure is available to make it safe for learners?
Yeah. Absolutely, Raymond. I think indeed there is a cultural issue here that needs to be addressed. First of all, I want to say that yes, the parents are right to perhaps create some guardrails in as far as protecting their children at that age. It's their responsibility as parents. But I think we need to take that responsibility to a whole new level in terms of, as opposed to just creating restrictive measures that come at the expense of these young people learning essential skills. We need to actually, expose them to these tools and instead focus on teaching them how to responsibly use these tools. So I think the responsibility of the parents should be to teach responsibility. And one way to do that is actually by emulating this and being the example on how these tools can be used to do good things. But also I believe that today, there are a lot of tools out there that I think parents need to also learn about, to arm themselves with, so as to ensure that they are creating those guardrails, as I call them, in a way that is not prohibitive to the learning of these digital literacies of their younger ones, of their children. So that's something that I would say, because we can fear that yes, if they exposed to these tools so early, they're going to learn all these sort of things. But the truth is that at some point, they're going to get their hands on those tools. So I think it's actually much better for you to carry on that responsibility as early as possible and teach them the values they need to be able to effectively use these tools, and teach them how to responsibly use these tools. I think that will pay off much better.
Norman, at a policy level, in terms of governmental intervention, is it something to start pushing for now, for young learners to be allowed with mobile phones in school, or being allowed to have access to digital devices in school? How does that access look like?
I think we've seen already in Uganda the government using national ICT policy. This enables an hybrid format of learning where they have incorporated the digital literacy and technology into learning. Absolutely, children and young people should be having access to these devices to learn, but like Robert said, it should be regulated because the 21st century skills are enhanced by digital skills. Things like creativity, where children are able to create content, communication. If you're learning in a hybrid format, you have to collaborate with your teachers. It also gives them opportunity to, opens them up to opportunity where they can do personalized courses where they want to learn and reach out to other people in the world. We cannot have a country where we want to do digital literacy, but people, because the generation that are going to take us forward don't have access to these devices. So there has to be an integrated approach where we have to regulate these devices, but also give them access, because if you see with the advent of COVID-19, everything went online, and you cannot, in other parts of the world, everything continued flowing, but we lost like 2 years, because when even this initiative of e-learning were brought up, people did not have the capacity because they couldn't be able to utilize the platform and opportunities and continue learning. So policy is very paramount, and the government should continue doing that. And if I were to sit down with a policy expert, these are the points that I would push ahead.
Anthony, if I could come to you before the break.
Sure.
Normally policymakers want to look at early adopters, and universities, higher places of learning would be the places we see for early adoption of digital literacy. And yet, yes, COVID-19 has showed us even at universities, even at higher learning institutions, adoption of basic digital tools has been hard. What is it about the early adoption that you can tell us that can help people easily adopt to digital literacy tools?
Thank you very much again. I think COVID was a really interesting period, especially for digital, especially for ICT. I mean, I remember when it struck, and I mean, we saw ourselves not returning to the classrooms, and boom, we were told, let's go online, let's try online. And all these platforms were recommended. And I mean, for someone who saw a computer, or who is also guided on how to use a computer, I'm talking about a lecturer in this regard, it really became, it was unheard of. How can I even sit behind a computer and teach someone who is on the other end? So this is something that was very unheard of to some of even the lecturers. So I think for me, it's about a mindset change. I mean, if I don't know something, I should allow Raymond, or I should appreciate that Raymond can teach me and also get onto it. Let me not get very rigid and close off to learning. So for institutions or higher institutions of learning like universities, I mean, we should be having free access. Of course, there are some students who really know these things, who have the digital literacy at their fingertips. So it should be, we should be intentional. And again, the intentional bit has to come out. Even when we get to the universities, let's appreciate that, yes, there are those that know very well, and there are those that are really green about this. So can we do groups, or can we pair them so that we help everyone to get on board when it comes to digital literacy? Let's not have facilities closed out. Let's not teach computer lessons in a theoretical manner. Let's have kids go to the computer lab. Let's have facilities where people can access and learn. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. We'll take a very short break, but when we get back, we'll discuss how the private sector can take part in the conversation on increasing digital literacy. Let's take a very short break, but we get back shortly. EdTech Mondays Uganda is supported by the MasterCard Foundation Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning and the Innovation Village. Thank you so much for staying with us on EdTech Monday. We're talking about digital literacy in sub-Saharan Africa, how it can be improved, what kind of infrastructure we need, and how to take charge of the conversation around EdTech and digital literacy. And before we took the break, we discussed a great deal of that. But Rob, I wanted to start with you now on the role of innovators. I know that everyone has a space in the digital literacy, but what is the role of innovators in making sure that digital literacy is readily available for learners?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Raymond. And I think that innovators and the private sector players in general have a very crucial role in bringing digital literacy to the masses. First, I think that as innovators and private players, we are definitely, of course, optimized for efficiency. And that means that there are areas where the public sector rather might be a bit slow on. Innovation plays a very crucial role in terms of accelerating the rate at which we are making digital literacy more accessible. And I think a very critical role that innovators can play is in ensuring last mile delivery of digital literacy. Today, there are a lot of solutions that are focused on ensuring that even that young person in the most remote village of Uganda can be included in terms of digital literacy and not left behind. And that's one area that I think private sector players and innovators can play a very crucial role. The other aspect, of course, is in ensuring that we are informing a lot of the policies that government is actually having in place, because we are the boots on the ground and we are the ones dealing directly with the end consumer. So I think having a framework where innovators can be brought to the table to really bring some of the best practices that they're getting from the field to inform the policy makers on what kind of policies are needed to ensure that digital literacy is made accessible to the masses of people is a very important role that we can play.
Norman, oftentimes the solution, for example, can be with innovators, and sometimes the scale is with government, but they're working in silos and not talking to each other. What is it that we can do to bring innovators and government in the same room so that, government's policy doesn't derail innovators and the innovators do not innovate outside of the scope of policy?
Thank you very much, Raymond. I think there is need for public-private sector engagement where government and private sectors like internet service provider in partnership provide access to digital literacy skills and tools, but also the other thing is for government to provide a policy framework which enable private sector to compete in that this will enable them to provide access and accessibility and devices. And the other thing is government and private sector should work hand in hand in skilling and empowering in terms of digital skills, because providing access alone is not in itself a bulletproof solution to these problems, but the policy framework that works to enable both parties to contribute to the cause is actually what is needed. Thank you.
What's the role for research institutions in getting data from innovators, getting data from government, and sort of using that data to inform public policy? What would you say would be the role that research institutions can play?
Thank you again. I think for me, for any innovation, for any product development, there has to be massive research. And this is where higher institutions of learning or research labs need to put their feet on the ground. Because when you talk about innovations or you talk about product development, you need, especially for tech, they really need to serve the needs of the users. So that's where the research is needed. Can we find or get the needs assessments done such that what is being developed, so that what is being innovated actually serve the needs of the end users? I see some programs and you wonder, did this person really sit down to think about the end users? The program is very complicated to run, and the people that are using it. So that brings a mismatch between the users and the innovators. So I think for me that when it comes to data collection, when it comes to knowing what needs the end users have, that's the role that academic or the researchers need to do. But also, it doesn't end at data collection, because like he's saying, innovations, there are a number of innovators at higher education institutions. So those can also team up with the private sector. We should be having really linkages or spaces where we can leverage from one another. Like you said, there's a lot of working in silos. The other one is doing this, the other one is doing the other. But at the end of the day, we're all looking at digital literacy. So for me, it's about making sure that we create a platform where we can have all the players come on board, but also for the researchers to bring for us what does the country need for us to get to the digital literacy that we're talking about.
Rob, for the first time in Uganda, all of these entities have aligned. The Ministry of Education released the fresh new curriculum, spread out that curriculum, allowed innovators to create content from it. The ISPs, internet service providers, zero-rated their internet for education institutions, but we aren't seeing the fundamental change in digital literacy that we thought we would see with these kinds of interventions. What is it that you would say as a parting shot that's lacking to sort of make these interventions work and work at scale?
Absolutely. I think indeed that for the first time in history, we have a lot of alignment in terms of the different players and stakeholders involved. But I think, first of all, that a lot of this fundamental change will not just come overnight, right? Typically, we have seen that it takes some time for this change to come and for us to begin to see the fruits of the work that has been put to ensure that digital literacy is met. But for me, as a parting shot, and something that I believe that could really ensure that we begin to see results, is I think that we need to put more concerted efforts, one, in now focusing the support that we are offering to the innovators on the front lines to make sure that digital literacy is being accessible by everyone. A lot of our innovators today, a lot of the entrepreneurs in this space are still lacking and struggling in so many other ways. And I think that much more work could still be done in supporting them to scale. Like you mentioned, scaling these innovations is something that is very cool. And I think government can come and play a very critical role in that, in creating a more enabling environment, right? Things like access to the internet, I think that can be done in a way that ensures that the solutions that already exist can then be expanded at scale. A lot of incentives need to be given to some of these innovators as well, especially in ensuring last mile delivery of digital literacy solutions to the most remote parts of the country as well. And last but not least, I think we need to see a much stronger collaboration from the public and private and academia as well. I do believe that academia has a lot of information, but it's the role of private innovators like myself and those out there to really bring about the commercialization of some of that research and really bring it to the general public. So I think with these things, we can begin to get ourselves in a track where we'll see the results and the fruits of all the hard work so far.
Norman, what's the magic bullet that we're looking for to deliver digital literacy across populations in Uganda?
First of all, I would like to say, I think developing content that speaks to the local people in terms of linguistic and the digital content that's prepared people for the job prospect because they need these to be able to live the 21st century. And I think innovators, government and private sector have a very big role in playing in terms to ensure that the content that are being developed actually speak. Like you said, the government have come up with the private sector and they are trying to align, but such problems come along. I think the bulletproof that I would say would be one, building capacity for these educators and also developing content that speak to the local people. But the other thing is that it's a multi-stakeholder approach that everyone has to come in and be able to do their part in order to solve this problem that we're facing.
Maybe if I could ask you again, what does capacity for teachers look like? Because the Ministry of Education says, for example, in cases where teachers were able to use computers, they were unable to deliver lessons using those computers. They were basically moving 20th century technology onto 21st century technology and trying to deliver it. So what does like building that capacity look like for teachers to learn?
Yeah, I think first of all we have to, because the devices are tech enabled, I think the capacity that needs to be done is actually them being literate about the technology that they're using, teaching them about how to use this technology. But as you said, also this problem comes along because access is not itself like, solving the problem of access is not itself like a breadth of rubber, because there's still even teachers or educators who do not have access to these devices. So being able to provide them with these devices is also paramount. This is a form of maybe grants or funding. And these are some of the help that even private sector need from the government, like my organization. I think this work hand in hand with when we're providing capacity building for people who are supposed to deliver this content, that's paramount. Yeah.
Anthony, so many players in the education space, including the MasterCard Foundation and Innovation Village, who make this possible, have been asking, if we were to put money, where should we put it? And many people in the space, the innovators will say, give it to the innovators. The government will say, give it to government. But as a sort of independent arbiter, as a research institution, Makerere, where would you say it would make most impact to send grant funding to improve digital literacy?
If we're really talking about digital literacy, then it's literacy, like I said at the beginning. You're teaching someone how to do something. You're teaching someone how to navigate, how to access, how to sieve through the internet and know that this information is not the right one, or this is what I want, this is what is required. So for me, really, without a bias, and he mentioned about it, it's to equip the trainers. Equip the trainers. I'll just speak to the e-learning initiative at Makerere University, where we are ensuring that all the courses, or most of the courses at the university get online. But you realize that because you'll not just, photocopy a textbook and just upload it on the internet for people to read. You have to create content that is attractive for the learners to read, that communicates or that speaks, so that when a learner gets onto this content, the person is able to read on their own, because you'll not be there to do it for themselves. for them. So for me, it's equipping the content developers, it's equipping the trainers for them to be the best, to do the best when it comes to digital literacy.
All right, thank you so much, Anthony. Thank you, Norman. Thank you, Rob. And thank you so much to our viewers who've been listening. This is the conversation around digital literacy, which is such a core component to making sure that EdTech survives and thrives in sub-Saharan Africa, and more particularly in Uganda. Thank you so much for joining us for this edition of EdTech Monday. See you at the next. EdTech Mondays Uganda is supported by the MasterCard Foundation Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning and the Innovation Village.